Okay, the last thing I want to show you today in regards to binding is how to close up your mitered corners. This is a mitered corner on a binding that is done by machine on the front and by hand on the back. You can use this method for double machine. There's a tiny little hair in there. For double machine binding or for machine and hand binding. It helps to strengthen this corner. It helps to make sure that the corner is not going to pop itself out because there is some fabric in here that could work its way out. And if you're entering a high-level show or really any show where you want to be really proud of that binding, you want to be sure that you've sewn your corners together because that is something that judges will sometimes look for. So I did have this needle nice and ready to go, but then of course things like that sometimes happen. So I've got a needle with dark blue thread on it, just to show you what's going on. I've got a knot in my thread already. I'm going to pop this knot, bury this knot so that it lives inside my quilt sandwich for when I begin, and I'll show you how to finish that when we get to the other side. So I'm taking a nice long jump here because I want that knot and its tail that is behind it to hide inside. So you'll see there's the knot. It's going to pop in with just a little tug on the front end of this. That knot just popped into the quilt sandwich and now it's totally disappeared. So now I can take my thread and I'm going to do just teeny tiny whip stitches where I grab a little bit of the underneath binding fabric and a little bit of the top fabric. And again, you would be doing this with a matching thread, not a contrasting thread. So this is really just to show you what's going on. And you probably want to take 5 to 6 stitches per side if you're doing a 1/4 inch binding, just to make sure you're giving it a nice solid finish. So let's see, we'll do at least one more bite here. And this also helps give you some really nice sharp corners that don't have that rounded appearance on them. And then we have one more probably before we flip around to the other side. The nice thing about the fact that you're working on a corner, now see how nice that is? It's all closed up. Nothing's going to be able to dig in there and open it, and it's not going to open naturally on its own. And because we are working on a corner, all we have to do now is roll this guy over to the front, and we can actually take this thread and go right through the middle and come out on the other side. So now we're stitching down the front side of the miter. Same thing, we're just going to go in on the underneath part of the fold and out on the top part of the fold. And we'll do that a couple more times on our way down. And we do want these to be really close together. So these are probably 1/8 of an inch apart. It's probably the most detailed part that you will do on your quilt. And if you were using a matching thread, the idea is that the threads hide and that this is not a visible part of your work. So there we go. Now that side is sewn down, the back side is sewn down, and we have this tail here. What are we going to do with it? We're going to make a knot, and then we're going to bury that knot into the quilt sandwich on the inside. So again, this is my cool homemade technique. You're going to make a knot on your thread with, I just kind of dive my needle through to make a knot. And once you get that knot on your thread like this, let me get that extra tail a little bit out of the way. So I've got a knot right here. If I pull tight, it's gonna finish anywhere up here on the thread, and that's not where I want it. I want it to finish way down here at the bottom so that when I bury this, it's going to remain tight. Those stitches that I made are gonna remain tight. So if I point my needle where I want it to go and then pull that knot down, keep pulling your thread tight, the knot will follow the point of your needle, and that is the magic. So here we go, we have one more knot. I'm gonna make 2 knots here to make sure it really hides. So I'm gonna point my needle down to where the other knot is so that we get a nice double knot there. Pull my thread, and bam, now we have a nice big double knot. See that right there? And all we have to do is dive back into that quilt sandwich right here at the edge of where those miters come together. Make sure you're not coming out the back side. You only want this to stay in the middle of your quilt, and you can always check that as well. If you flip over, see I've got my needle showing, so that's no good. So I'm going to pull back out, dive down in, try to stay within the quilt sandwich. You don't want to come out the back. See, again, I'm coming out the back. So this is not always a first try situation. I think I've got it this time. Yep, nothing coming through the back. And I usually hold my fingers back here just so I can tell if that's going to happen without looking. So take a nice big chunk. Again, nothing showing on the back. So you want a nice big stitch. This is probably 3/4 inch because I want that knot to stay hidden underneath and not come back out over here. So if you take a bigger stitch, that knot is guaranteed to stay inside because there's not enough thread for it to follow you back out. So once we get to this point, we give it a little tug. And there we go. The knot is buried and hidden, and you can't tell where this stitch line stopped or started. You cut that close, give it a little rub, and it's gone. It's disappeared. It's magic, and you never know where those fabric stitches stopped or started because we buried a knot over here, and we buried a knot over here. And of course, if that stitching was the same color as the binding, you would never ever see it, but you'd have a great corner. Thank you for watching.